Right, what's going on, everyone? It's Man Like Kale, and welcome to the YouTube. And this is my first video. I know you're going to be hearing this voice a lot more, hopefully. And basically, you're just going to hear me talk about what's on my mind and what's been going on. And we're just going to be having conversations that need to be had. And you're going to hear perspectives you may never have heard before. And today, I want to talk about racism, and just my whole thoughts, and just a perspective from a black guy who has gone through racism. Obviously, I've gone through racism, but I'm one of the lucky ones. Obviously, I'm still here, which unfortunately a lot of black people do not have the privilege of. Can say the same thing basically. And luckily, I've not had to really grieve. Like, I've not had anyone close to me go through a madness. Like, just nothing made it. But anyways, like, I just want to just share just a couple of thoughts of what's been going on. Because obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, I think it's in particular in the June period, the whole Black Lives Matter thing just exploded ever since the tragic events of George Floyd. And I wasn't quick to talk on it because people were outraged, rightfully so, and I just felt like I didn't want to, because I don't usually talk on these type of things, or at least I've talked with a couple of people, but I haven't really gone public on my actual thoughts, because this, like, racism is like something I've felt from a young age. Like, I live in Western society. I've been in this education system throughout my life, like from childcare to uni to now, which is where I'm in uni, obviously. And I can't speak on behalf of other black people, but I can speak on me, and I can tell you, I can't probably remember a class where pretty much every class I've been in, I'm one of, if not the only black person, from whether it's from childcare to uni. Like, this year, for instance, I have been in uni for one day, and that one class I had, I was the only black person there. And for me, it's normal because I've had that throughout my life. But that's not the point. Like, but it's like, just I've seen a lot of people talk on racism, and I don't know, man. Like, some perspectives I'm with, some I'm not. But the reason why I didn't go out there during this whole movement, because racism is more than a movement. And this is not me getting on Black Lives Matter, but what you guys are doing, keep doing it. And any people that have these tribes that are generally are trying to make a change, big up to all of you, and keep doing your thing. But the unfortunate reality is, racism is not a comment. Racism is not just something you say. Racism is an institution that oppresses not just against black people, but just people, minority groups, for over, or I can speak on for black people for over 400 years. It's probably been even more than that. So the reason why is, like, I've seen just like social media, I don't know, like, there's good things and bad things, and I get people are trying to educate themselves, but you just kind of feel like just racism is taken as a trend, and it's not really taken seriously. Because respect to all the people that post black squares on Blackout Tuesday. Respect you lot. I'm not gonna go you lot. But if for 1 second you think that's gonna make a difference, that's when I question things like, okay, we've posted a black square, but what's happened since? Like, let's be honest. Ever since that we done that one Blackout Tuesday. I don't know if this is going to be I don't know if this is a once a year, every Tuesday, once a month, I don't know. But ever since that one Blackout Tuesday, what's happened? Like, the murderers of George Floyd, has anything changed since then? I've not heard. Breonna Taylor, has anything been happening since? I've not heard. Has there been any new laws, any new statutes, anything like that? I've not heard. So it's like, yeah, we've done this movement, but what's happened? And this is where you just wonder, do people just see racism as a social trend? Because when that event happened for like a couple of weeks, and I think this was longer. This is longer than usual. Like, usually a racial event will happen. There'll be a bit of talk for a week, and it will go away. But this one, it's still something different about it. Like, this is like, for like a good month, there was a mad movement. But then, and people were protesting. And big up to all you people that protest, but I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't go. There's reasons for that. Well, one is, obviously, we're in a pandemic. And I live with my mom, I live with my dad, and I've got 2 younger siblings. So even though I'm not too fussed about me getting it, my dad's in his 50s, my mom's in her 40s. Like, I'm not going to do that, innit? And secondly, I was looking at the protests, and it's like, it just felt like a bit forced. And by that I mean, obviously, I just felt like we're just going to get people into one space, and anything related to racism we're going to talk about. And I feel like from a protest, it should be structured. You should have a specific objective you want to get from a protest. Like, a protest, one protest is not going to solve racism, but maybe you can push for a law to be put in place. Because racism, there are so many different subtopics to racism, stemming from the different races, like, you've got police brutality, workplace racism, institution. Like, there's so many different subcategories, branches. And then I look at some of the pictures from these protests. You've got one person saying Black Lives Matter, the next person saying F the police, the other person saying Aboriginal Lives Matter, the other person saying justice for George Floyd, and justice for all these. It's like, there's so many different topics, and we're all just jammed it into one protest. And it's like, if I'm like a leader, and I'm seeing people giving me something, it's like, I'll ask you guys, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to do? You know what I'm trying to say? And obviously, the easy answer would be stop racism. But how do you stop racism? How do you tell someone to stop racism when they're ignorant to it? And this is where I think racism is a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior. It is. It's learned. You don't just become a racist. You know what I'm trying to say? It's learned behavior. That and if you just think about it, slavery arguably is going on today. But if I'm going off, like, the civil rights movement was like, what, 50 years ago? Slavery was happening then, 50 years ago. Now you think about it, 50 years ago, their slave masters, they've probably had kids. their kids have probably had other kids. That's 2 generations. Like, someone the same age as me probably has a grandparent who was a slave or a slave master, if you think about it. So it's like, racism realistically is going to go on for at least the next couple of generations, if you think about it. Given, like, do you know what I'm trying to say? And this is why, just more needs to be done. And obviously, and I think, in my opinion, right now, the things we could do is, in my opinion, there should be a law on police brutality. Straight away, there should be a law. Like, that should be a law. And this is not, and the simple, if a police exercises any excessive force onto a civilian and they die from it, that should be murder. Simple, end of story. There should be a law on police brutality. There needs to be a law written in the Constitution that any police brutality, you're fired and you're potentially going to get jail time. Simple. Second of all, in schools, and I've kind of touched on me as a young, like me and my experience, but what disappoints me is like me living through school, doing school in Western society. Racism is not even racism, like discrimination, just different colors. Like, it's not talked about. Do you know what I'm trying to say? It's not talked about. Like, the only time I've talked about it is when I've done a speech. And my first speech was in Year 9. My first speech was in Year 9. And it was about Muslims not being terrorists. Year 10, I done a speech about immigration. Year 11 and 12 were about racism, like in Australia, obviously, because I'm from Australia. So that's basically the only time I've tried to bring conversations about this. And it's like, when you're a kid, let's say when you're like 4 or 5, you observe things. Yes, you might not be able to talk properly and communicate properly, but you observe things. So, for instance, me being in prep, going to school and being probably the only black person in prep, is like, kids subconsciously notice that. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, kids subconsciously notice these things. Like, because if you think about it, kids, when you're in your household, you're very isolated. You're only seeing the world from your household. And when you go into the big world, and when you go to school is like the first place where you are forced to interact with people that look different to you. Well, for me, I have to, because when I go into school, 99% of the people don't look like me. So most of my friends and most of people I talk with are gonna look different to me. You know what I'm trying to say? And I think in schools there should be little things like, let's say, like, singing songs about, like, like singing songs about, like, we're all together and things like that. Like inclusiveness, equality. Like, obviously, you're not gonna teach a 5-year-old kid about racism, but just like subconscious things, like encouraging people. Oh, you know what? We're all the same and things. You know what I'm trying to say? And I feel like that, just little things like that, because kids are not as dumb as you think. You know what I'm trying to say? Like my sister, for instance. Yeah, my sister's 5, and like, and she'll come to me. You're gonna marry a black person. Bless her. But like, the fact, she didn't say you're gonna marry a girl. She says you're gonna marry a black girl. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, and she's 5. So like, people, because my parents, they're both black. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, kids pick up on these things, and I feel like in the whole education system, racism needs to be emphasized. And for instance, yes, we talk about Aboriginals, but even that, we're talking about it from the white man's perspective. You know what I'm trying to say? So it's like, I think that's a start. because for me, the older people for me are write-offs. Like when you've 30 years of your life, if you've been told one thing, like it's just very hard to unlearn it. So for me, just give up on them. Like let them. But for me, I'm more worried about my generation, future generations, even my generation. I think we're finished. But like my kids. For me, realistically, I hope, I pray, by like my grandkids and maybe my great grandkids, that racism will be significantly lower. That's what I hope. That's when I hope to see. I hope my kids will see this. I don't think in my lifetime I will see a big change in racism. But what I hope to see is my grandkids, my great grandkids, their kids. They will see this change, and I hope. You know what I'm trying to say.